A jealous coworker sets a trap to get their rival fired and steal their job, only to fall in their own web. The open-plan office of Holmesworth Enterprises always smelled faintly of burnt coffee and desperate ambition. Among the rows of desks and glowing computer screens sat 32-year-old Ethan Cole, a tall, lean man with neatly combed dark hair, olive-toned skin, and a sharp jawline that looked carved for boardroom dominance. His crisp navy suit was perfectly pressed, but his brown eyes betrayed a flicker of something restless. That restlessness had a name: Ava Marlowe. Ava, 29, was the company's golden child, honey-blonde hair tied in a sweet ponytail, emerald-green eyes that radiated confidence, and an easy laugh that made clients lean in. Her sky-blue blouse and pencil skirt seemed to sparkle under the fluorescent lights. She was brilliant, charismatic, and already whispered to be the frontrunner for the upcoming senior project manager position, a role Ethan had been eyeing for years. When Ethan overheard a passing conversation between two executives about Ava's impeccable leadership record, something inside him twisted. She didn't deserve it, not after all the late nights he'd put in, the deals he'd salvaged, the sacrifices he'd made. And that was the moment the first thread of a plan began to weave itself in his mind. A plan to remove her from the running entirely, permanently, if he played it right. Ethan knew that in any corporate battlefield, the easiest way to topple a rival was not brute force. It was finding a single crack and prying it open until the whole foundation collapsed. He began observing Ava like a hawk. Every lunch break, every phone call, every little quirk in her behavior was noted. His polished leather shoes often took him casually past her desk, his sharp brown eyes glancing over her open documents and email drafts. One afternoon, he overheard her on the phone speaking in a hushed but urgent tone. "Yes, I'll make it work. Just don't tell anyone here, okay?" Ava's back was turned, her knuckles white as she gripped the receiver. To anyone else it might have been meaningless, but Ethan smelled opportunity. Something personal, perhaps, something she didn't want her colleagues or her boss to know. He couldn't hear the whole conversation, but he caught fragments. Loan payment, extra shifts, and can't risk losing this. Ava had a secret, and Ethan's mind buzzed with the possibilities. If he could connect those fragments into a clear weakness, he could frame it, twist it, and serve it to management on a silver platter. That night Ethan stayed late, not to finish reports but to dig. The company's network security was strong, but not impenetrable if you knew where to look. And Ethan, meticulous and patient, knew exactly where to start. He didn't need to hack her computer. He only needed to plant himself near the printer Ava used and accidentally collect documents left behind. By Thursday, his persistence paid off. Among a stack of spreadsheets and project outlines, he found a personal invoice, addressed to Ava from a debt collection agency. The amount was staggering. His pulse quickened. Now he had leverage. He began crafting an email, not to send just yet, but to keep in his back pocket. A carefully worded accusation suggesting Ava had misused company funds to pay personal debts. It wasn't true. But in the right hands, with the right evidence sprinkled in, truth was irrelevant. The next step was to make sure there was proof for management to find, and that, Ethan thought, was where his real talent would shine. Ethan's trap had to be flawless. Any sloppy detail, and it would backfire. He created a dummy vendor account in the company's database, a fake consulting firm with a professional-looking logo, a believable address, and a subtle link to Ava's home city. He funneled a small transaction from the project budget into that fake account, then left a trail in the records pointing to Ava's credentials. It was like weaving silk, smooth, invisible, yet deadly. For days, Ethan remained calm and cordial toward Ava, even joining her for coffee once, complimenting her presentation skills. She had no reason to suspect him. If anything, she seemed to think they were on friendlier terms. Inside, Ethan was already picturing the moment management called her in. The confusion on her face, the disbelief in her green eyes as her career crumbled. The promotion would be his, the glory would be his. But in his obsession to make it perfect, Ethan didn't notice a shadow watching him from a distance. A quiet observer who had seen more than he realized. It started as a rumor. Ethan heard it one morning while grabbing coffee in the break room. Two junior analysts were talking, their voices barely above a whisper. "They say Ava's being watched," one said. "By who? No idea, but someone's checking her project logs. And it's not her manager." Ethan felt a cold flicker of unease. Had someone caught on? No, impossible. His plan was airtight. Still, he found himself scanning the office more often, noticing people's eyes lingering on him a second too long. That night, while reviewing his evidence, Ethan found something odd. The dummy vendor account he had created now had an additional file, one he hadn't uploaded. A scanned document with his name buried deep in the metadata. His stomach clenched. Someone was playing his game. Someone had found the web he'd spun and was quietly, methodically threading his name into it. The next morning, Ethan arrived early, trying to get ahead of whoever was meddling with his trap. He combed through the database, deleting traces, overwriting logs, securing files. But for every line of data he erased, something else seemed to shift, subtle, almost taunting changes. By mid-morning, Ava received an anonymous email. Ethan watched from across the office as she opened it. Her brows furrowed, her lips parted in shock. She glanced toward him, her green eyes narrowing ever so slightly. Ethan's pulse thundered. She knew something, or at least she suspected. The game was no longer one-sided. What unsettled him most was the sudden realization that maybe, just maybe, Ava wasn't the easy prey he'd imagined, and whoever else was lurking in the shadows of this office war might be setting a trap of their own. Later that day, Ava approached Ethan at the break table, holding her usual cup of chamomile tea. She looked calm, too calm. "You've been working late a lot," she said casually, her green eyes glinting with something unreadable. Ethan forced a smile. "Just trying to stay ahead. You know how it is with the promotion coming up." "Oh, I know," she replied, sipping her tea. "Funny thing though, someone's been tampering with the vendor accounts. I found a few odd entries, thought you might have noticed." Her voice was gentle, but there was a razor edge beneath it. Ethan's mind scrambled. Was she bluffing? Was this her way of warning him that she'd caught on? "Strange," he said, pretending to think. "I haven't seen anything like that. Maybe I should take a look." Ava just smiled faintly and walked away, leaving a faint trail of chamomile and suspicion in her wake. Ethan felt the first pang of something he hadn't felt in years: fear. 2 days later, Ethan received an email from an untraceable address. "I know what you did. I also know how to make sure no one finds out. Meet me in the parking garage at 9 p.m. tonight." The message was short, cold, and terrifying. Ethan's first instinct was to delete it, but curiosity and the threat of exposure was stronger than caution. When the time came, he descended into the dimly lit garage, the air thick with the smell of oil and concrete. A figure stepped from behind a pillar, a man in his 40s with sandy hair and a worn leather jacket. "You're not as clever as you think," the man said, his voice low. "You left traces, enough for someone to notice." Ethan bristled. "What do you want? Simple. You pay me, I erase everything, no one ever knows." Ethan realized this wasn't just a game anymore. This was blackmail, and the price for silence was going to be steep. That night, Ethan barely slept. His thoughts raced between the faceless threat in the garage, Ava's watchful glances, and the slow unraveling of his once perfect plan. The idea of paying off the blackmailer gnawed at him, but so did the risk of doing nothing. The next morning he checked his inbox. Another email, this time with an attachment. His breath caught as he opened it. It was a detailed timeline of his activities. Every fake invoice, every altered log, every late-night database entry. The proof was undeniable. "TikTok," the message read. "You have 48 hours." Ethan's crisp navy suit suddenly felt suffocating. He could feel the office walls closing in, the whispers growing louder. Every ring of his phone made his pulse spike. The promotion now seemed irrelevant. Survival was all that mattered. But Ethan wasn't about to fold, not yet. If someone was going to take him down, he'd take them down first. Ethan decided to trace the blackmailer. He began digging through staff records, looking for anyone with both access to financial systems and a motive. The leather-jacketed man didn't match anyone in the company directory, but Ethan suspected he wasn't working alone. That meant someone inside Holmesworth was feeding him information. His eyes kept drifting toward Ava's desk. She was too composed, too unshaken by the growing tension. Could she be working with the blackmailer, turning his own scheme against him? The thought ignited his anger. If Ava wanted a war, she would get one. And this time he'd make sure there was no way to trace it back to him. Ethan crafted an email from a fake account addressed to Ava, filled with cryptic financial data and a subject line reading, "Confidential, vendor payments." He embedded a hidden tracker to see where the information would go once she opened it. When Ava received it, she hesitated for a moment before clicking. Ethan watched her closely from across the office as her expression shifted. Curiosity, then calculation. Within an hour, the tracker pinged. The file had been forwarded, not to the blackmailer, but to the company's internal investigation team. Ethan's stomach dropped. She wasn't just defending herself, she was building a case against him. The next morning, Ethan walked into the office to find an unfamiliar tension in the air. Conversations hushed when he passed. 2 security officers stood near the elevators, speaking quietly with a man from compliance. At his desk, an official email awaited him. Mandatory audit of project accounts. All senior project manager candidates will be reviewed. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. Ava had moved quickly, faster than he'd anticipated. She had planted the seed, and now the company was shining a blinding light into every shadow he had created. Ethan told himself he still had time to delete the rest of the evidence, but when he tried to log in, his access had been restricted. The trap he built was now a cage, with him locked inside. Late that afternoon, Ava appeared at his desk, her voice low enough for no one else to hear. "You should have been more careful, Ethan," she said, her emerald eyes fixed on him. "The thing about setting traps is, someone's always watching the trapper." Ethan forced a smirk. "You think you've won." "I don't think, Ethan. I know." She placed a small flash drive on his desk. "That's for you. Watch it tonight." Then she walked away without looking back. When Ethan got home and loaded the drive, his blood ran cold. It contained security camera footage of him in the office after hours, altering files, sliding forged invoices into the printer. The angles were perfect, the timestamps undeniable. Ava didn't just suspect him, she had been documenting him for weeks. Ethan's mind spun wildly. How long had she been playing this game? Had she baited him from the start, knowing his ambition would make him reckless? The blackmailer's emails suddenly made sense. They weren't a separate threat, they were part of her plan. A two-pronged attack to push him into panic while she quietly stacked the evidence. He paced his apartment, the city lights flickering through the blinds. His career was over if this went public. He needed leverage, something to turn the tables. But Ava had been too smart, she'd never left a trace of wrongdoing. The only path left was to confront her directly, and hope she underestimated him one last time. The next morning, Ethan intercepted Ava in the underground parking garage. His voice was low, urgent. "You're good," he admitted. "I'll give you that, but you're not perfect." Ava tilted her head slightly. "You really think you're still in control?" Ethan took a step closer. "I know you set me up, and if I go down I'm not going alone." She studied him for a moment, then smiled, a slow, dangerous smile. "That's the thing, Ethan. You already went down, you just haven't hit the bottom yet." Her words rattled him more than he wanted to admit. As she walked away, her heels clicking against the concrete, he realized he wasn't steering this anymore. He was being dragged. At noon, Ethan was summoned to a conference room. Waiting inside were the head of HR, the compliance officer, and 2 security personnel. The blinds were drawn, the air thick with formality. "Mr. Cole," the compliance officer began, "we've completed our preliminary investigation into the vendor account irregularities." Every word was deliberate, measured, inescapable. They laid out the evidence: emails, invoices, database logs, the damning security footage. Ethan tried to speak, to shift the blame, but each protest was met with another piece of proof. His carefully built narrative crumbled in minutes. By the time the meeting ended, his ID badge had been deactivated, his personal items boxed up, and his reputation reduced to whispers in the hallway. As Ethan stepped out of the building carrying his small cardboard box of belongings, he spotted the man in the leather jacket leaning casually against a car. The same man who had blackmailed him. "You," Ethan snarled. "You're working with her." The man smiled faintly. "Smart guy, took you long enough." He reached into his jacket and tossed Ethan a folded piece of paper. Inside was a printed email chain between Ava and himself, discussing every stage of the setup. "She paid me to keep you distracted," the man said. "My job wasn't to ruin you, just to make sure you panicked enough to leave footprints." Ethan's chest tightened. Ava hadn't just countered his plan, she'd engineered every misstep, every desperate move he made, until he'd hung himself with his own rope. 2 weeks later, Ethan sat in a corner cafe, nursing a bitter black coffee and scrolling through the company's press release on his phone. There it was in bold text. "Holmesworth Enterprises proudly announces Ava Marlowe as our new senior project manager." Her smiling face beamed from the screen, her honey blonde hair gleaming under the studio lights. The article praised her integrity, leadership, and commitment to excellence. Ethan slammed the phone down on the table. Integrity, the word tasted like ash in his mouth. But deep down he knew she had played within the rules. Technically, she'd never forged a document, never stolen a cent. She'd simply waited for him to reveal himself, and reveal himself he had. Nights became the hardest. Ethan's apartment felt smaller now, the silence heavier. He replayed every moment, every choice, searching for the point where he could have turned back. But every thread led to the same place, the moment he decided Ava didn't deserve the promotion, and he did. His reflection in the mirror looked older, wearier. The sharp, confident man in the navy suit was gone. In his place was someone who had gambled everything for ambition, and lost it all to someone who had outplayed him at his own game. What stung the most wasn't losing the job, it was knowing that Ava would never think of him as a threat again. He'd been removed from her board entirely. Months later, Ethan heard from a former colleague that Ava had secured a major client, earning the company millions. She was thriving in the role he had once dreamed of. He walked past the Holmesworth building one evening, looking up at the lit windows. Somewhere in there, Ava was probably at her desk sipping chamomile tea, smiling as though she'd never been in a fight at all. Ethan realized something then. Ambition wasn't the enemy. Arrogance was, and his arrogance had blinded him to the fact that every step up the ladder could be a step into a trap. He turned away from the building, blending into the crowd, his story swallowed by the city's endless noise. If you enjoyed this tale of corporate deceit and downfall, make sure to subscribe for more gripping stories of ambition, betrayal, and the price of power.